In April 2020, a £300 million takeover deal between Newcastle owner Mike Ashley and the financier Amanda Staveley, fronting a bid involving Saudi Arabia's sovereign wealth fund, otherwise known as the PIF, and the Reuben Brothers, was said to be close to completion. The majority of Magpies fans were delighted. Despite continued criticism of Saudi Arabia's human rights record by Amnesty International, they saw this as the perfect opportunity to get rid of the despised Ashley, who took over the club in 2007 and whose perceived lack of ambition and spending had seen the club go from consistent Champions League challengers in the early part of this century to relegation battlers year after year. They started to dream of Man City-like investment, and superstar arrivals with Coutinho and even Mbappe linked with unlikely moves to the northeast. But as we all know, on the 30th of July 2020, 17 weeks after the agreement, the deal collapsed, with the consortium publicly withdrawing their offer. Fast forward just over a year though, and the takeover is still not officially on or off, leaving the club in a constant state of uncertainty. Today on FD Explained, we want to analyse why the deal was called off, what could happen next, and what this means for Newcastle's chances of survival this season. Let's get started. When any new group or individual buys a football club in the top 7 tiers of the English game, they are subject to the Owners and Directors Test, which outlines requirements that would prohibit a potential owner from taking over a club. These include criminal convictions for a wide range of offences, a ban by a sporting or professional body, or breaches of certain football regulations like match fixing. In regards to the potential Newcastle takeover, the issue was the Premier League were unsure of the relationship between the Saudi Arabian state and its sovereign wealth fund that wanted to buy the club. As George Colkin recently explained in The Athletic, essentially the Premier League argues that the Saudi state would be the owner of Newcastle if the transaction occurred, continuing that it therefore believed members of the Saudi government should be put through the test. The club and the prospective buyers insisted that the government and the PIF were separate entities, and revealed they provided evidence from the highest possible levels that there would be no state interference. As a result of this bone of contention, the owners' test was never approved or rejected by the Premier League, and the consortium pulled out of the deal, citing an unforeseeably prolonged process, which meant their commercial agreement expired. The backlash against the Premier League was fierce, but Richard Masters, the league's chief executive, was quick to try and deflect blame. He wrote a letter to Newcastle MP Chian Wurra, explaining that the league offered the consortium the ability to have the matter determined by an independent arbitral tribunal, but the consortium refused. Of course, for the Premier League, this wasn't just about the bid's ownership structure or even human rights. In June 2020, the World Trade Organization issued a report which claimed representatives of the Saudi state had facilitated a breach of international piracy laws via the TV network BOTQ. The network was accused of illegally broadcasting a range of professional sports, including Premier League matches. Of course, this wasn't allowed, with the Qatari-based company BN Sports having paid £400 million for the sole rights to broadcast Premier League matches in the Middle East. While Saudi Arabia insisted there was no link between its government and the alleged piracy, it promptly banned BN Sports from the country in retribution, meaning illegal streams were Saudi Arabians' only means to access the league. It doesn't take a genius to realise why this put a spanner in the works at a crucial point. Newcastle initially declined the option of independent arbitration, basically an independent dispute resolution, and the deal was called off. However, that wasn't the end of the story. Having turned down the opportunity to have it reviewed by an independent arbitrator, Newcastle fans' continued protest against the Premier League's decision persuaded the club to finally open arbitration proceedings against the EPL in November 2020. In May, it was revealed that Newcastle's case was to be heard in July, and all parties duly met in London on Monday the 19th for the hearing. However, rather than come to a much-desired conclusion, the main part of the hearing was postponed until early 2022, with the only reason given that there were issues with the disclosure of evidence. Multiple sources told The Athletic that both parties failed to receive adequate evidence from Saudi Arabia, although the consortium emphatically and definitely denied that was the case. Mike Ashley and the prospective owners were once again left bitterly disappointed, with The Athletic claiming there had been so much confidence that a deal would be completed this time that discussions were held over a possible replacement for Bruce, including some involved at Euro 2020, while there were talks about new players too. As they had done throughout this protracted mess, supporters took action. The Newcastle United Supporters Trust called for clarity from Masters, whilst a group of fans travelled to Parliament Square, then Downing Street in the Premier League's headquarters to peacefully protest. This was backed by the consortium, who encouraged fans in their quest for transparency, while Staveley's husband, Mehrdad Guddusi, tweeted, "There's only one party playing games here." For a fan base that has spent 14 years trying to get answers from an owner loath to communication, to be once again left in the dark by the Premier League and the whole process upset them greatly. The irony of Mike Ashley calling for MPs, the government, the media and the general public to demand that the Premier League finally accepts public scrutiny was clear. After all, here is an owner who, according to The Athletic, is yet to release the club's 2019-20 accounts or discuss the club's use of the government's furlough scheme. Whilst fans have clearly been mistreated during this whole process, the club itself is also suffering. In 40 years' time, the 2021 season won't be a particularly memorable one for Magpies fans looking through the record books. Newcastle finished 12th, tellingly their second highest finish in the last 5 years, with 45 points, their joint largest top-flight tally since 2013-14. But scraped below the surface, and it was another bitterly disappointing campaign. After 3 wins in their opening 7 games, Bruce's side went on to win just 2 of their next 14 games, a period that also saw them exit both cups, with their 1-0 Carabao Cup quarter-final exit to Brentford particularly painful. The stats were damning. They ranked 19th for possession, 18th for pass accuracy, 16th for shots, conceded 15.1 shots a game, a figure topped only by West Brom, and had the fewest touches in the opposition penalty area. For a club that had spent over £100 million on new signings since the start of 2019-20, £17 million more than Liverpool, a run of 2 wins in 21 fixtures in all competitions mid-season simply wasn't good enough. Whilst Mike Ashley was keen to blame dark forces for his side's inability to establish itself as a power in the English game, many fans would instead call out his lack of spending and the club's continued employment of Steve Bruce. Firstly, transfers. Since 2010-11, Newcastle have spent a net £157 million. For context, Crystal Palace, a club who were only promoted back to the Premier League in 2013, have spent a net £165 million in that period. Whilst West Ham, who like Newcastle have also spent a year in the Championship in that time, have spent a net £280 million. The Magpies faithful were left even more frustrated when it was revealed by the 2021 Sunday Times Rich List that Ashley's personal wealth was now over £2.7 billion, having grown by £769 million over the previous 12 months. In terms of Steve Bruce, he deserves credit for eventually steering Newcastle to safety, losing just 3 of their final 13 fixtures, and beating the likes of West Ham and Leicester in entertaining games. Managing director Lee Charnley has shown no inclination to sack the former Sunderland boss, despite the fans' apathy, and the club's perceived lack of clear identity and tactical plan, but his decision was largely vindicated towards the end of the campaign. However, with the delay in the arbitration hearing until early 2022, and Mike Ashley's continued determination to sell the club at some stage next season, he has been reluctant to strengthen the side. With 24 days until the window slams shut, Newcastle are yet to make a signing, the only Premier League club not to do so. And with last season's hero Joe Willock seemingly no closer to signing permanently, the squad, which flirted with relegation for much of the season, actually appears weaker than it did in May. As Price of Football presenter Kieran Maguire explained, Mike Ashley is now in a position of someone planning to sell their house and is therefore doing the bare minimum in terms of maintenance. Therefore, in terms of recruitment, planning and player strategy, it's on life support at present. Questions persist around Bruce. During pre-season, there has been negative chanting during their games against Rotherham, Burton and Sheffield United, while star player Callum Wilson inadvertently gave the majority of credit for their arrival to Graham Jones, who arrived as a coach in January. Speaking to Alan Shearer, Wilson said Jones definitely complimented the manager because he's a little bit more tactically aware and up to date, whereas the manager has other strengths and attributes. It remains to be seen whether Bruce will persist with his favoured 3-5-2 formation, given their inability to bring in a box-to-box number 8, and the fact it doesn't allow them to play Ania Fraser, Almiron or Joe Linton, signed for a combined £60 million in their natural positions, with Wilson and Saint-Maximin favoured up front. Many feel sorry for Bruce. According to the Newcastle Chronicle, they are just one of 2 Premier League clubs not to have a football executive at Director of Football level, having disregarded the role since Joe Kinnear's ill-fated second spell at the club. Many fans have been left wondering who is in charge of the club's transfer strategy and what type of player are they targeting, having previously focused on the French market, then players with a high sell-on value, and recently those already established in the Premier League. Without any clear ending to the takeover saga, a muddled strategy, an unpopular manager and a stark lack of investment, many Newcastle fans are now wondering whether the club is sleepwalking towards a third relegation of the Ashley era next season. The next few weeks are going to be fascinating. So guys, that was our FD explained on what has gone horribly wrong at Newcastle. What did you guys think of the video and what do you want to see us cover next on this strand? Let me know in the comments down below. If you've enjoyed this video, don't forget to smash that like button, hit subscribe and click on screen for another great Football Daily video, and I'll catch you next time.